we talk about being in this prison, right? But that's a prison that we hold in ourselves that, this prison don't compare to.
Well, Trent, thanks so much for being part of the Guy Behind Bars podcast. I'm excited to hear a little bit about your story. Why don't you just kick it off with kind of as far back as you can remember, give us a little context to your life and what your childhood was like, what life before prison was like for you.
Okay. Well, I grew up, my parents were actually divorced when I was like 1. So I grew up in 2 different households. Both of them were remarried, and my step-parents were great, or are great. And but I grew up in a very, very small town. There's more people on one of these buildings than the town I grew up in. I think it had 411 people on the population sign. And I went to a really small school and all that. Well, and then because my dad, he cowboyed, and that's what we did. And, I team roped and calf roped and rodeoed all my life, all the way up until I got locked up. But in high school, I become an alcoholic in high school, my junior year, and then probably all of my senior year. I drank. I was arrested twice my senior year of high school for drinking, 1 DWI and 1 MIP. And then after that, I kind of got my stuff together a little bit. I worked for my dad he managed a ranch there north of Bonham. And I did that for years until I went to the oil field at 23, I think, was down there a couple of years. And then I become a crop insurance adjuster. But the whole time I was still drinking a lot. I went to bars a lot. That's just the lifestyle I led. That kind of part of that roping and rodeo and lifestyle, that's just what we did. And when I pulled up to a roping, everybody knew that there was alcohol in my, cooler full of beer in my truck and stuff. And it led to, I got another DWI when I was 20. And then that led to when I was 28, I actually got another one coming home from a rodeo. And I was out on bond when my accident happened. Because I ended up having on April 20th, 2013, I had a traffic accident. It's one of those things that you never expect. And it just, I would never in a million years want to hurt somebody. It's something that we talk about being in this prison, right? But that's a prison that we hold in ourselves that, this prison don't compare to. And if it wasn't for my Lord and Savior, that I wouldn't be able to walk in this.
Yeah. And so tell me about that. How did you end up becoming a Christian and wanting to change your life? Like, what was that moment like?
Well, actually, I grew up as a young age going to church and stuff. But my parents didn't hardly go to church that much. They're believers, but, never really went to church after, I was probably 8 or 10 years old. And then, so you always know the stories of the Bible. But whenever I got locked up, and I always believed, but when I got locked up, I couldn't have told you the difference between Peter and Paul. And they had me in, because mine was kind of a high-profile case, they had me actually in a seg cell when I first got there and didn't know nothing. I'd spent a night in jail, a few nights in jail, but I never had been locked up really before. And so actually the officer that was working that seg pod came back there, knocked on the door and asked me, he's like, "Is there anything I can get for you?" The only thing I could think of was my grandmother was a teetotaling Baptist. If the doors were open, she was singing type lady. And, I knew Grandma would tell me to lean on the Lord. And so I asked him to bring me a Bible. And he brought me one of those black prison Bibles. And as a New King James Version, I've still got it at the house, and it's got 1,000 notes in it just because, and you're back there in Seg, and I didn't know, and I didn't even know where to start. I started in Genesis, and ended up going all the way through it. And, man, and ever since then, at that time, I had like the weight of the world sitting on my shoulders. And he ended up, it was like 2 weeks later, and he's like, hey, I got you. And as hard as everything was when I was going through county and going through trial and all that, he gave me that strength to get through it.
Yeah.
And, and then I came to prison, and it's just been he's opened every door that could possibly open. I mean, I know it's hard to say this, but I've been blessed, very blessed, all the way to the job I have now, and to getting to walk around and be a mentor to these men.
Yeah, what is that like? What is, obviously, just giving a little bit of context to you talked about your life before, but what's life like now inside of
All right. Well, I guess it would have been back in 2020 during the pandemic, the Safe Prisons sergeant that was here came and actually asked me, he's like, would you like to be a peer educator? And so he got me pulled up there to the one building and trained, and then we actually started teaching the class in 21. And
what class is that?
Peer education.
Okay.
I teach, and that's like a class. It's 3-day course that guys come in there, and if it's really just to kind of learn about prison. And what we've done is trying to really swap it up, and we're trying to change the culture in this place. And then obviously we have a badge that we can walk around and be mentors to the guys out here. Y'all talked to one of them earlier, Mr. Burrows.
Yeah.
And he, man, his story, like guys like that we've just walked up on, and he's an awesome guy. And his story is, talks about it, and he gives, us the credit. And like from me walking up on his door one day, and I remember it, he was in there doing burpees, and, he had a Odinist hammer on his deal and was a gang member and all that. And from our conversations, he completely gave it up. And, that's the kind of stuff that, man, makes us feel like, hey, you have a purpose in life. God put you here for that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And we have so many different stories about that, and it's been a complete game changer.
And when you talk about changing the culture of this place, this is one of the largest prisons in the state of Texas.
Yes, sir.
In some people's perspectives, that they would say that it could be a pretty bad place.
Yeah.
What is the culture that you hope for, that your peers hope for, that are leading this program, that you guys are going to be able to form here inside of this prison?
Well, there's so much negativity in prison. Like everywhere you go, it always seems like the world's against everybody. And we want to show that, hey, man, you have a purpose. Just because you're behind the fences and behind all this stuff does not mean that we can't change our lives, but change who we are. I didn't necessarily grow up in this lifestyle. So when I got here, it's a learned lifestyle as far as how everybody else is. But when you hear people's stories, you understand. And a lot of times it's just behind, hey, you need an example. I don't know how to do this, so this is how I want to do it. And to be that example and, help guys out through education and because I would love to see, we talk about rehabilitation all the time. But that rehabilitation comes from us as well. Like you have to want to change, and just that mindset of want to do a different way. Like you talk to guys, so many guys have, several numbers, they've been down here several different times. How can we break that cycle?
Yeah.
That's the kind of positive change that we want to instill in men.
Yeah. How much of that culture have you seen changed compared to what still needs to happen? Obviously, like we know, there's a lot of work constantly, right?
Yeah.
Till to the day that all of us die, that we'll be working on changing the culture in every society and community. But what are the changes that you've seen so far?
A lot of it is, especially, guys seeing that, hey, we can go down here and do this, or like whether it be this class, you have the life coach, the cognitive life skills class now. You have the rehab programs. Guys see a positive change, like, hey, these guys can do it. I want to do it too. And then for me, and especially one of my coworkers, Paul Timms, when we started doing this, especially helping the self-harm department, we went back to SEG and made SEG kind of, that's what we wanted to do. That's where we wanted to be. And we have so many men back there that have been just held back there for so long. I mean, I know one guy that's been back there 21 years in a box, you know, and has gave up. And as far as all the stuff that kept him back there, he's going to grad and the whole 9 yards to get up out of there. And it's completely changed his life back there behind, you know, just saying, hey, I don't want this no more. There was one guy we was talking to the other day that, you know, I remember when you'd walk up on his door and he couldn't even talk to you. He was so high to where now he's talking about writing sermons. He watches 6 hours of sermons all day long, and then he's doing all these positive things for himself and has completely given his life over to Christ. And man, it's awesome. It's just great to see those kinds of things. But people have to have a direction. If they don't have a direction to get to, how are they going to know where they're going? And that's what we kind of want to help people out with.
Yeah, so speaking of that, somebody who's kind of just sitting on the fence right now, and they have this thought, like a lot of individuals do, of this jailhouse religion, right? Versus like a true, real, deep relationship with Christ. In fact, like I often tell people that the jailhouse religion exists in the free world too, because I think a lot of people are in relationship with religion, checking off boxes.
Absolutely.
But they don't have a deep relationship with Jesus. What does that mean to you, and what would you say to somebody that's literally on the fence of either saying yes or no to a life with him?
Well, I think it starts with, you know, what do you want? Like, we talked about how much, oh, we're hurting today, or I can't believe this happened to me today. And people shy away from God thinking like it might be his fault, or why did you do this to me? And, but instead of realizing that when you go to God, when you give your life to Christ, that's all that matters. And whenever you do that, it goes to the fact that, how can I put it? You know, I want something better for myself. I want that with that relationship, you understand it. When you feel the Holy Spirit inside you, and when you go to reading scriptures and it starts coming off the pages, and you know, and they talk about the Bible being, you know, alive, and that's when you find that out. When you stop saying like, I'm tired of the world, I'm tired of the flesh, I'm tired of that, you know, the drug use. That's just a mask. I'm ready to take my mask off and give my life to, you know, to God. That's where I would say it's needed the most. Like when somebody's sitting there straddling on the fence, like if you're really ready to do this, take the mask off and give your life to Christ, and you'll understand that feeling, who he is, because he's going to start changing things. You know, a lot of people think, well, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do my will. And people forget that it's his will that we have to do.
Yep.
And that's something that I've come to learn. Like, you know, pretty much you're sitting in the passenger seat. You just walk through the doors that he opens. Yep. And it's amazing.
Well, and you being a cowboy, like I try to just even think life is probably a lot like a rodeo, or being on the back of a bucking horse or a bull. And Jesus is the only thing, your saddle, he's the only thing that's going to keep you on that thing and not just completely fallen and broken apart. Right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I love it. I love what you are doing in this facility. I love what God has done in your life.
Absolutely.
I know that being around many facilities around the country, there's something special that's happening in this place, and it's due to yourself and the other men like you that have a heart to reach the other men on this compound. And
I appreciate that.
So we're for you. We're praying for you, man. And I just appreciate everything that God's done in and through your life. So it's
Absolutely.
Great to meet you today.
Yeah, you too, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening to the God Behind Bars podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll subscribe from wherever you're listening to this, leave us a review, and share it with your family and friends. We're so thankful to all those that make it possible for us to continue to reach men and women in prison with the gospel. If you'd like to donate to support the work of God Behind Bars, you can visit godbehindbars.com/donate.